Okay, here we are looking at Union Station. I got this kind of in a weird way. I bought I bought a bunch of XX games at an auction, and this came along with it. I don't know if I paid a couple of bucks for it or if it was like a freebie that was thrown in. If you know, you paid you bought a certain amount of stuff or whatever. I just don't remember. Either way, it was one that intrigued me. It looks like one of those Winsome type games, but on a very, very tiny scale, right? You know, most of the Winsomes open up and they're not quite XX in size, but they're fairly big. This one comes with a bunch of shares. So let me talk about what's going on a little bit more. I have very little idea of it except for I've read the rules. And I know I'm not going to be able to play it effectively. I don't think if I played it once, I would be able to play it effectively either, because like many of those Winsome games, you have to make a pricing decision on what stock values are actually worth that is tough to really decide just from reading the rules and maybe playing it once or twice, which is of course all I ever get to play. So let's take a look at the components that we have. We have a little player, we have the board. We'll talk about that in a bit. We have a little player aid thing that gives you the sequence of play. And the number of shares of each company that there are, which is a hint towards their valuation, because the less shares that are out, the more valuable your shares are going to be. By the way, I'm playing in a place I don't think I've ever videoed a game at before. I used to play here with my wife, but you know, with tiny things like this. But I'm right in my living room area, and you know, I kind of realized, geez, I can play wherever the fuck I like now. There's nothing that's going to disturb me, nothing that's any different. It's just like, and I don't want to be up in the dark of the loft, which is where I had moved my camera, and I'm like, well, why run downstairs? I can play right here. This is probably going to be a quick hit anyway, while I prepare for other things. This is kind of an intriguing little design here. Now you can use poker chips for this, but this is going to attract player money. You have 3 discs, one for the singles digit, one for the tens digit, and one for the hundreds digit. Hopefully that's more than you need. Everybody starts out with 30 bucks. There's going to be 5 railroads in the game that are represented by these discs, the colored discs which match the shares of them. 5 shares, one of each company, is available at the beginning of the game. This is going to be a game where your valuation is based on your stock value plus your cash, and you have the capability to sell stocks, although and buy them, although it doesn't really affect their value, which is kind of weird. And the board itself, everybody's going to be running out of Chicago to try to get to destination cities, but that may not be their primary goal. That is the end goal of the company, and the company kind of stops progressing once it hits one of those. These discs are going to be the rail spaces that they hold. There's 2 discs per hex allowed. This is going to track the actual value of the railway, which is of some importance when dividends get paid out. This is sort of a bonus dividend situation when all the companies move down to one of these lines. When the last one moves in, everybody gets cash based on what layer it is. So it's an extra influx of cash for more investment. Just, you know, so you don't have to sell stocks or whatever. Up here, there's a track of how many dividends get paid. Each time a company pays a dividend, it's going to mark that off. And once that hits 20, that's one of the possible end game situations. There are others. The shares, the top one here is going to be flipped over, and then they're going to fill out here. And you can purchase from these guys, and they increase the valuation of the company. There's a number of things that increase valuation of the company. Building into certain types of spaces does, and people buying the shares do. Okay. that's kind of the broad overview that I've gotten from it. Again, you can use poker chips if you want. I'm like, wow, this takes up so much less space. I'm doing it this way. This explains all the what you do. I'm going to start up here. These shares get auctioned off one at a time, starting from the first and moving all the way down. At the beginning of the game, you're supposed to shuffle the five different companies and put them out. I found it easier to shuffle the whole deck and draw and hope I just get lucky. I came close. Didn't quite happen. I drew maybe 4 or 5 extra cards, but then I just reshuffled the deck anyway. So it didn't really pay off to do that, but I hate shuffling little decks, and I feel a lot more comfortable shuffling a big deck. Plus, it gave me more shuffles of the main deck from the last play. This game, well, actually not from the last play. This game, I don't think had been played. The cards were taped together with something. Maybe you could slip it in and out of it, but I don't think so. I had to rip it off, and they were all sorted, which seems like a pretty odd situation as well. So I think it never actually got played by the guy who sold it to me. All right, so the game begins with an initial auction. Like I said, the initial bids on each of these companies is $5 or more. And then each player in turn gets to keep bidding on that particular share, and whoever bids the highest gets it. And this is where the game is the trickiest. This is the place where the decisions are the hardest. You're walking into a brand new game, and you're thinking, well, I'd like to get it as cheap as I can, right? With some of the Winsomes, that's not the case. With this one, I think it may be, but it's hard to tell. What you want to do, well, it's never clear what you want to do just from looking at it, right? But, you know, let's say I bid 5 on something, hoping to get it for 5, and somebody else goes to 10 or whatever. Okay, I let them have it because I think 10's a decent price. The next one comes up. Say I put a limit of like $5 or $6 on it. Well, I don't get it again. And the thing is, each person can pay up to 30. That's what they have for any given share. But then they won't have any cash for later. And if they do, like, let's say somebody buys one for 10 and nobody's willing to go that high, they could actually buy 3 of these for 10 each and have 3 shares, and, you know, other players maybe get theirs a little cheaper, but they don't have as many shares. Okay, let's keep looking here. So the first player starts the bidding. Whoever won a share starts the bidding on the next certificate that's up. Now, he probably has less money than the other people, certainly on the first run. If somehow we get to a position where a share is offered and nobody has $5, that person, the first person, gets to get it for 0. Now, this is a little problematic because the player who would have put the share up for auction receives it for free. Someone could conceivably get multiple shares that way, which feels absolutely ridiculous. I don't know how that would happen, right? Like, you know, I buy a share for 25, 26. You know, everybody buys their shares for 26. Well, it won't happen in 5 players. It can't happen in 5 players. But in a smaller player base, it might happen where people overpay for their shares. Anyway, I'm not worried about it. It's all right. Then you go through the normal sequence of play where there are 3 things. You can do one of them on any turn, and you cannot pass. One of the things, so the prices that are bid on the initial share determine the value of the company. Makes sense, but it's a little weird. Then you're going to deal, how many? Just 1? After all shares have been auctioned off, move the top face-up share from the offer deck. Yeah, so this is actually face-up. We know at the beginning of the game what the next share on offer is going to be. And that's going to move over here, and another one's going to go face up. There will always be one face up in the offer deck as long as there is an offer deck. Now, the shares to the right of the offer deck are the offer. That's going to be up to 3 shares that are available for purchase, each in the +1, +2, +3 share spaces. Whoever owns the share of the lowest valued railroad takes the first turn. That'll be the one that got bid the least. If there's a tie, the last person to win a share from the lowest valued roads, plural, because you'll only have one share of each company, is the starting player. So the start player is going to get, and I will be going counterclockwise, counterclockwise instead of clockwise. It's just what I do. I don't know why. And I might associate the color of a company with the color of a player by shifting some of those tokens around. I'm not sure. Beginning with the start player and continuing clockwise, each player performs one of the 3 actions, which are buy stock, lay track, or sell stock. When you buy stock, you pick one of the shares up here in those 3 spaces and take it. You find the share value on the railroad value track, you pay the amount of money equal to the railroad's value, and then you increase its value by the bonus that you just got. Now, after that, you take the top share off the offer deck, which is face up, and it moves to the +1 space, and the others will shift to get out of its way. There may be some times when this action is done, not from this particular, not from the buy stock, but there might be some times where a card is supposed to be placed here and this is full. That will not, the card won't go then, because you can never push anything past the share +3 space. Okay. Chicago Union Station Company is this guy up here. I kind of told you. Every time a share gets purchased during the buy stock action, that railroad's disk moves a space down. This doesn't happen during the initial purchasing. And when the disk enters the 4th space, it'll no longer advance. Once the final disk, the final company makes it past a given line, there's a special dividend that gets paid. The amount of money to the right line is given to is given to each railroad's shareholders divided between the owned shares, rounded up. Okay? So if there's only one share of a company, and remember, one of them only has like 4 shares, when it goes to the $10 side, that guy just gets $10. Sweet. Note that the companies don't have any cash on their own, and in fact, they don't need it. You're not going to be putting cash into companies in any way in this game, which feels a little weird with this kind of game, honestly. Okay, and this does not trigger this marker to go forward. The second action you can take is lay track. And you must pick one of these each time. Choose a railroad that you own at least 1 share in. You place 2 track discs on the map of that railway. You're allowed to place the track either directly adjacent to Chicago, one of these 2 spaces, or adjacent to track that you already have. So for example, here they show, hey, blue has 2 here. That means the extra tracks can be placed all over there. Now, how do they word it? Each hex can hold up to 2 track discs. I wonder if you can blot somebody out. I doubt it because all the companies start, but maybe. Once that limit's been reached, no additional discs can be placed in that hex. Subsequent track must be placed adjacent to previously placed track from the railroad. So looking at this picture, this would be illegal unless you could place the track sequentially, which is something the rules don't seem to allow. Because it says subsequent track must be placed adjacent to previously track from the railroad. It doesn't give the timing. Like, could it be just previously? And I think this picture indicates that it has to be allowed. After laying track, move the top share of the offer deck into the +1 value deck and move things forward, but this doesn't happen if it was already full. Each railroad has a destination city kind of off to the edge of the map. When it reaches its destination city, that railroad can no longer lay any track. All of its track go back in the box. All of its remaining track go back in the box, and you will not take this action any longer. Okay. Which is why you don't necessarily want to go towards your destination city, but it's valuable. Each time your railroad places a track in a town, these gold hexes, the railroad's value increases by 2. Each time it places track in a city, other than its own destination, the railroad's value increases by 3. I don't think you're allowed to place in Chicago. Again, this picture doesn't show anyone able to place in the Chicago space because it's adjacent to them. Again, the rules are not, they don't feel like they've absolutely nailed everything down. You have to do a little bit of thinking. Each time you place a track in your destination city, that's once per game, the railroad value increases by 5. I don't know if that 64 is an actual maximum. Okay, the third thing you could do with your turn is choose a railroad, sell stock. Choose a railroad you own shares to sell. You must sell all the shares you own of that railroad. You find its shares value on the railroad value track, take that amount of money for each share, and lower the value of the railroad by 1 row. Kind of interesting. You crash its value down, kind of like in a XX game. If the railroad is lowered into a gold dividend payment box, it does not pay a dividend. The railroad's marker can never go lower than 5. You discard those sold shares for the game. They have no further effect, but they do reduce the amount of outstanding shares for other players. So you're kind of selling it back to the company or something. After the 17th dividend has been paid, there's this gray zone. You can't sell shares after that. Okay. Whenever the railroad increases into or through a gold dividend space on the value track, except during setup, each shareholder of that railroad gets the railroad's current value divided by the number of shares owned by the players rounded up. You adjust your money counters accordingly. Discarded shares don't count in any way, like they don't reduce the value that anybody gets. In the case that the railroad's value increases through 2, you do them sequentially. It's good about that. Once you reach the 20th dividend space, that payout is done and the game ends. The game ends in one of 3 ways. If all the shares have been purchased, that means this deck has run out and there are none up here, because some of them could end up in the box. They don't get recycled. 20 dividends get paid out, or all 5 railroads cannot lay more track. Now, there's a couple of ways you might not be able to lay track. Once you reach your destination, you can't lay any more track, but you also might get cut off so that there's no place you're allowed to lay. Players add their money up to the individual railroad values of each of their shares. So each share is going to have a value equal to its valuation. It's not like another dividend payment. It's bigger than that. So dividend payments get watered down by the amount of shares that are out, but share value doesn't, and share value increases by the number of shares that people buy. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. I don't know what it's all going to mean. You know what? I don't think I'm going to do this as a quick hit. That's the intro. But I may do the rest of it quickly. I just feel like let's get the rules out. I've gotten kind of long-winded, and this is a little longer. This is a little longer rule book than my quick hits usually are.